So when we talk about mental health medication, you've probably heard of the usual suspects. But what happens when those first-line options just aren't the right fit? Well, today we're diving a little deeper into the toolkit. We're looking at SNRIs and atypical antidepressants. Understanding these is so key to finding a path that really, truly works for you.
If you've ever researched antidepressants or you know someone who's taken them, that term SSRI probably rings a bell. And it's true, they're often the first thing a doctor considers for depression and anxiety, and for a lot of people, they're an absolute game changer.
But here is the single most important thing to get your head around. Your brain is not my brain. Mental health care is deeply, deeply personal. It's just not a one-size-fits-all deal. What works wonders for one person might do very little for someone else. And that's exactly why we need to know about all the other tools available.
Okay, so to really understand how these different medications work, we've got to kind of pop the hood and take a look at the wiring in our brains. It all comes down to this incredible communication network, this messenger system.
Now, all the meds we're talking about fall under this big umbrella term, psychotropic medication. I know it sounds a little intimidating, but all it really means is any medicine that affects the brain's chemistry to help influence our mood, our thoughts, or our behavior. Simple as that.
So how do they actually pull this off? Well, they interact with these little things called neurotransmitters. And honestly, the best way to think of these guys is like chemical text messages that your brain cells are constantly sending back and forth. Every single thing, every thought, feeling, mood, it's all happening because of these tiny messengers.
And while there are tons of these messengers, there are a few heavy hitters when it comes to mental health. You've definitely heard of serotonin, right? It's huge for mood and anxiety. Then you've got dopamine, which is all about pleasure and motivation. And we're also going to be talking a lot about norepinephrine, which is crucial for energy and focus. All these meds work by nudging these key players to try and find a healthier balance.
All right, with that basic science down, let's look at our first group of medications beyond the SSRIs. These are known for their really clever, dual-action approach, the SNRIs.
And this slide lays it out so clearly. See, SSRIs, they're specialists. They focus only on serotonin. But SNRIs, that stands for serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, they work on both serotonin and norepinephrine. It's like using a multi-tool instead of just a screwdriver. You're targeting two key systems at the exact same time.
So, why would you want that dual-action tool? Well, because norepinephrine is so tied to energy and alertness, SNRIs can be a fantastic option if your depression comes with that crushing fatigue, or if you can't concentrate on anything. They can even help with certain kinds of chronic pain, like fibromyalgia.
Of course, it makes sense, right? If you're working on a second chemical messenger, you might see a few different side effects. You can still get the common stuff you see with SSRIs, but because norepinephrine dials up your alertness, it can also potentially increase your heart rate or blood pressure, and that's definitely something your doctor will keep a close eye on.
All right, let's move on to this really interesting category that people call atypical antidepressants. But please, don't let that name fool you. Atypical doesn't mean they're weird or strange, it just means they're highly specialized.
Think of these as the precision instruments in the mental health toolkit. They just don't play by the same rules as SSRIs or SNRIs. Each one has its own unique way of working, its own special mechanism, which makes them incredibly helpful for very specific situations.
Okay, let's start with a big one, bupropion. This one's fascinating because it leaves serotonin completely alone and instead focuses on dopamine and norepinephrine. This makes it a go-to option for people who are really struggling with low motivation and that can't get out of bed kind of energy. Fun fact, it can also help with certain side effects from other antidepressants and is even used to help people quit smoking.
But, and this is a big but, there is a really crucial safety note with this specific medication. Because of how it works, it can make seizures more likely. So it's pretty much always avoided for anyone with a history of seizures or certain eating disorders. This is exactly why being totally honest about your medical history is so important.
Next up, we have Mirtazapine. Now, this one also works on serotonin and norepinephrine, but in a completely different way from the SNRIs. It often has a really sedating effect, which makes it a fantastic choice when depression and severe insomnia are a team. It can also help boost a poor appetite, helping with both sleep and nutrition.
And finally, let's talk Trazodone. This one's interesting. While it's officially classed as an antidepressant, these days it's almost always used at lower doses for a totally different reason, as a really effective, non-addictive sleep aid.
Its powerful sedating properties make it a go-to for battling insomnia, especially when it's a huge part of someone's anxiety or depression.
Okay, so we've been really deep in the weeds of pharmacology. But now it's so important that we zoom out and put all of this in its proper context. Because medication, no matter how amazing it is only one piece of the puzzle.
And if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. These medications are not a cure. They are not happy pill. They won't fix a toxic job, and they won't solve a difficult relationship. They are a tool. That's it. A very powerful tool, but not the whole solution. So what does this tool actually do? Well, this slide shows it perfectly. First, it just reduces the sheer intensity of the symptoms. It turns down the volume on the noise in your head. Second, that creates a more stable emotional foundation to stand on. And third, and this is the most important part, by doing those first two things, it gives you the capacity, the breathing room, to do the other essential work, like therapy and building healthier habits.
Which, it all brings us to the final, biggest question. With all these different medications, all these strategies, what is the actual point? What are we really trying to do here?
The goal is never ever to change who a person is. It's not about changing your personality. It's about clearing away the fog of symptoms that are stopping you from being yourself. It's about giving you the right tool so you can finally feel like you again and reclaim your own life.